Let's start with a quick review of how arguments work in GMAT critical reasoning. For questions that deal with assumptions, identifying the author's assumption is the crucial step. The assumption is always unstated. If something appears in the text of the stimulus, it can't be the assumption. And the assumption is what connects the conclusion and the evidence. But remember that the GMAT is about pattern recognition. So here, we'll discuss some common argument patterns that recur frequently in questions that deal with assumptions. Since the assumption family makes up more than half the critical reasoning questions you're going to see on test day, this is pretty important. The first special case is causality. This includes any argument in which an author concludes that X caused or is causing Y. There are three possibilities that you should consider anytime you see a conclusion like this. First, is the author overlooking a likely alternate cause? Is it possible, in other words, that Z is causing Y? And note that Z could be causing both X and Y, which would explain the correlation between X and Y. Here's a little example. Joe was sad, and then Maria became sad, so it must be that Joe's sadness caused Maria's sadness. Well, what if it's a cloudy, cold, overcast day? The gloomy weather could explain both Joe's sadness and Maria's sadness. This alternate cause, since it affects both Joe and Maria, would explain why Joe's sadness and Maria's sadness occurred around the same time. The second possibility to consider is reverse causation. So instead of X causing Y, it's actually the case that Y causes X. And the third possibility is coincidence. Just because two things happen at the same time doesn't mean that they have any meaningful relationship with one another. Let's look now at questions that include examples of these types of patterns. We'll start with causality. Begin with the stem. Which of the following, if true, would most seriously weaken the argument above? You know that this is a weaken question. The conclusion is that our architecture schools must be doing something wrong. The evidence is here. Almost monthly, we hear of domes and walkways collapsing in public spaces, causing serious injuries. What's the assumption? In a nutshell, it's that architects and design are responsible for the problems with the buildings. The author assumes that there's no other possible cause of the trouble. Since this is a weaken question, look through the answer choices to find an alternate cause. And answer choice B is exactly what you need. Most of the problems with modern buildings stem from poor construction rather than poor design. That's another reason buildings are falling down. It's not that they're designed poorly, it's that they're built poorly. B is the correct answer, but let's take a quick look at some of these wrong answer choices. A is outside the scope of the stimulus. Even if students are currently instructed in basic physics and mechanics, they may not be spending enough time learning good design principles. So A is incorrect. And C is incorrect as well. The stimulus doesn't indicate how great a percentage of time spent studying aesthetics would be too much. It's possible that this author would say that less than 50% is still too much. D doesn't work because it fails to provide any new and relevant information. The author merely complains that some buildings are collapsing. The fact that most are not collapsing does not make it less alarming that some are falling down. E says that architects study as long and as intensively as most other professions. This essentially means architects try hard too. But the author's criticism is not that architects are lazy. The author's complaint is that they are obsessed with beauty to a dangerous extent. It's an irrelevant comparison, and E is another wrong answer. When looking at a GMAT argument, see if you can identify the cause and effect. From there, analyze the argument with the question stem in mind. Whenever you have to weaken a causal argument, simply look for another possible cause, or see if the cause and effect can be reversed. Doing this will get you to the answer quickly on test day.